this is not a test. It has been reported that 2 or more individuals have been committing homicides and robberies in Dayton, Ohio. Unfortunately, at this moment we don't have any information about any of the suspects' physical appearance. More updates will be released in the next few hours. Thank you.
It is an ordinary Christmas season in Dayton, Ohio. The city is surrounded by Christmas lights. The almost 200,000 civilians are doing their ordinary traditions, like watching their favorite Christmas movies or spending time with family. However, a group of teenagers were bored that Christmas with nothing to do. They all weren't close to their families, and all they had was each other. They called themselves the Downtown Posse, and they were led by 19-year-old Orvelis Keene. 3 other people made up this group, which was Keene's 16-year-old girlfriend, Laura Taylor, 17-year-old DeMarcus Smith, and his girlfriend, 20-year-old Heather Matthews. As they sat deciding what to do, they made the normal person decision like anybody would think and decided that they wanted to go on a killing spree. They came to the decision that their killing spree would begin on Christmas Eve, and they would first target 34-year-old Joseph Wilkerson, who was a General Motors worker. Their plan was to send Laura and Heather to his home to seduce him into having sex with them. However, their real intention was to rob and unfortunately kill him. So their plan would begin, which would eventually turn into a horrific killing spree. Keene, Taylor, and Matthews would walk to his house, and Joseph was willing to have sex with the 2 women. The 4 of them would go into his house, where inside they would drink, and after a while of being there, Taylor would take Joseph to the bedroom, and Keene and Matthews would begin to follow after them. Once in the bedroom, Keene would take out his gun and order Joseph to get on the bed. Joseph would comply, and once he was on the bed, Taylor and Matthews would tie him to the bed. After this, Taylor, Matthews, and Joseph would walk around the house with the goal of finding valuable items to steal. In total, they found 5 items, which were a TV, a blow dryer, a microwave oven, a curling iron, and a cordless phone. After taking these items, the group would stuff all the items into Joseph's car, which they also plan on taking. After this, Keene would find a .32 caliber Derringer in the garage, and he would take the gun. The group would take Joseph back to his bedroom, and there Keene would cover Joseph with blankets and shoot him in the stomach. According to Keene, the reason he covered Joseph with blankets was so that the noise was muffled. However, after this, Joseph's feet were shaking, which meant he was still alive, and he was feeling all the pain from the wound. However, after this, Taylor would grab a gun and shoot Joseph in the head, which after the second shot, he stopped moving. Right after, they would flee the area in Joseph's car. That same night, Keene, Taylor, and now Smith were roaming the streets when they spotted 18-year-old Danita Goulet, who was using the phone booth. Keene and Smith would approach her with their guns and ordered her to take off her shoes. Once she followed their commands, the 2 men shot Danita. Smith would take her jacket and shoes and flee the scene. Police would be called and found a disposable ammunition called Blazer, which is not usually used for homicides and robberies. It is most common for things like target practice. Unfortunately, though, this would be the only clue police would be able to gather. After this, the group would flee to Heather's home, where Smith would give Taylor Danita's jacket and Smith would keep the shoes. Later that night, 3 more people would come over to the house, which was 16-year-old Wendy Cottrell, her boyfriend Marvin Washington, and Matthew's ex-boyfriend, 28-year-old Jeffrey Wright. While hanging out though, Jeffrey and Matthews would begin to argue, which led to DeMarcus wanting to protect his girlfriend, shooting Jeffrey multiple times. However, only 1 out of the multiple shots would be successful, which hit him in the leg. Jeffrey would end up leaving and shuffle his way over to a neighbor's house to get help. In fear of having the police call on them, the group would flee the scene again, in the same car that they took the previous night. On Christmas Day, Taylor decided she wanted to go kill and rob her ex-boyfriend, Richmond Maddox. Taylor would go to Richmond's parents' house and lure him outside, and the 2 would get into his truck. As they were driving down the street, Maddox noticed that the car that the group was in was following them, which caused him to speed up. However, while he began speeding up, Taylor took out her gun and shot him in the temple. After shooting him, she quickly grabbed some cash from him and jumps out of the car with mild injuries. Moments later, the car Maddox was in crashed into a tree. Law enforcement again would show up, but the only information they were given was that a young African-American female was seen fleeing the car. Unfortunately, at the time, police were unable to figure out who committed the murder. On December 26th, the group would go to an ATM where they failed to rob someone, so then they would drive to a gas station where they began shooting at Kathy Henderson, and luckily she was able to escape unharmed. Afterwards, they would steal her car and drive to a mini market. Taylor would go into the store and buy gum and a bottle of juice. Taylor would begin talking to the cashier, who was Sarah Abraham, and she was 38 years old. It turns out that her and her family owned the mini mart. Another man was there, which was 70-year-old Jimmy Thompson. It turns out that he bought Taylor the juice that she wanted because she didn't have enough money. Soon after, Keenan Smith would barge into the store and hold Sarah at gunpoint and order her to empty the cash register. She handed the around $40 in cash to Keen. Right after, though, he shot her in the head and began shooting at a few other people in the store. Luckily, Thompson was able to survive the incident because he fell to the ground and pretended to be dead. The two other people that they shot luckily survived the incident. Sarah was brought to the hospital, where she would unfortunately pass away from her injuries a few days later. Police would arrive at the crime scene and begin gathering blood samples, and there they would find the same shell casings found at Danita's crime scene. Thompson would go over to the police and begin telling them everything that happened and the physical description of the suspects involved. The group would then go pick up Wendy and Marvin, which were the two hanging out with the group the night that Jeffrey was shot. They would drive to a gravel pit and start berating the two about if they knew anything and ask them if they had told police. This wouldn't be enough proof for Keenan Smith, so Smith shot Marvin and Keen shot Wendy, and unfortunately they would meet the same fate as all their other victims. Now, after each of the killings that the group had committed, they would swap the license plate on their car so they wouldn't be recognized. So the group would go to a gas station to steal another car, and they were unfortunately successful by holding a woman at gunpoint and robbing her. They would steal her Dodge Shadow, swapping the license plate, and drive off. At this time, Police Sergeant John Huber was driving around the town when he spotted the Dodge Shadow. He would request a plate check on the car, and when it came back that it didn't match, they went after the car. While he was following the vehicle, Smith would jump out and run off, but the police decided they would follow the car and look for Smith later. He would eventually pull the car over, and once he got to the window, he noticed the multiple guns in the car. He ordered them to get out of the car, which they cooperated with, and they were all arrested. Police would also discover the belongings of the victims that the group had killed. Smith would also be found at a house nearby, and he was also arrested. Each of the members of the group were charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder, which in total the entire group was charged with 8 counts. In the end, Smith, Taylor, and Matthews were all given life sentences. Taylor and Matthews are currently serving their sentences at the Ohio Reformatory for Women, and Smith is serving his sentence at the Mansfield Correctional Institute. Keen was given the death penalty and was executed by lethal injection on July 21st, 2009.